Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. Today we're going to talk about talent and skill as a wildlife photographer. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. You may not like them, but you got to watch the whole video right after this. I've been thinking a lot about the talent and skill that we have as wildlife photographers. What is it that we possess? What makes some better than others? And how much talent and skill do you need to be good? So that's what this video is going to explore a little bit. Now, bear with me. I got to say this up front. This is very subjective. I have my own personal biases. They are probably going to come across a little bit in this video. And I don't want to upset anybody because there's a fear here that when I tell you, you can be a good wildlife photographer and not have a lot of talent or not have a lot of skill, that may upset some people. But you got to promise, you're going to hear me out. And before you reach for that little thumbs down button down there, if you press it, you want to put a comment down there because I would like your thoughts on this. Is there something to what I'm saying? I'm going to try to apply a lot of logic. I try to separate the emotional parts out of here and just give you my logical thoughts on this. I think a lot about this stuff. So here's my thoughts. So we're going to talk a lot about talent and skill, and I'm going to define those for this video, how I'm going to use them. Talent are going to be those innate qualities, those gifts that we are born with, that we can hone, but think, I'm a fast runner. I have a great eye. I'm a good artist. I have good hand-eye coordination. Those are the types of talents that I think we can be born with. Skill is going to be those things that we develop over time. So we practice and we refine and we get better at them. So in this video, I'm going to refer to both, but they're a little bit different. So again, talent, what we're born with, skills, what we work at. So what are the talent and skills of a wildlife photographer? So I'm going to present this example. I was talking to somebody the other day, and this example really came through. I was looking at artists who draw and paint, and I was just blown away. And sometimes I think, okay, I consider myself an artist because I'm a photographer, but I'm not that. Those people are talented and skilled. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So a few years ago, I photographed an eagle that was diving into a lake backlit. All right. One of the few images I have hanging in my house. This is, if I can get the glare off of it, this is a print that I have in my house, okay? And this is an incredible, in my opinion, an incredible work of art. It required tremendous talent and incredible skill. Now, before you, again, go and reach for that thumbs down button, I want to tell you something about this. Up on the screen over here, I'm going to put the photograph that I took of the eagle. And this was done about a year after I'd started photography. I had the camera sitting in the car. It was set to JPEG. It may have even been in auto mode. I literally just saw the eagle. I grabbed the camera and I took the picture. That act of pointing the lens and hitting the button did not require a tremendous amount of talent. And it required very little skill. However, I got an image over here. Now, why do I say that didn't require a tremendous amount of talent and skill, but I said this required an incredible amount of talent and skill? Well, here's why. This isn't my photograph. Down on the bottom, I'm going to put another image. Now, this is actually not my work. This is done by an artist named Kathy Sheeter, who I've gotten to know over the years. She actually is involved with raptor identification. She loves hawks. She happens to be an incredibly talented artist. I am blown away. This that hangs on my wall is not my photograph. This is her scratchboard, used or created by a reference of one of my photographs. The scratchboards are created just to give you a quick idea of how talented this person is. You take two mediums, you take a dark and a light, and one is laid on top of the other, and I'll move it over here so you can see it, and then the top layer is slowly chiseled away, and all of this incredible detail comes out. Now, I'm going to flash her image up a little bit bigger so you can see it, and then I'm going to take you across the physical print that I have here and give you some of the details. I mean, this is skill and talent. Now, does that mean as a photographer, I'm a hack? I hope not. But it does sometimes make me question, what is the real skill and talent of a wildlife photographer? So I want to talk about a couple concepts here. I want to talk about wildlife photography, how it's different than other genres of photography, and what the differences sometimes in skill and talent might be. And I also want to talk about two different styles of wildlife photography. And this is where I think some people might get a little offended, because I'm actually going to tell you that I think some styles of photography take more skill and talent than others. And I will provide you with examples, but I'm gonna defend my position here, and down in the comments you can defend yours. I love debate. By the way, no need in the comments to get nasty. I really love the positive energy that is created by this channel. So let's keep it positive, but I do love a good debate. So feel free to debate me down in the comments. Let's talk about how wildlife photography differs a little bit from other genres of photography. In other genres, so let's take somebody who does studio work. I think there's a lot of learning that's involved, a lot with lighting, a lot with settings, a lot in editing and post-processing. There's a lot of skill that has to be acquired. Now remember that eagle image I took, very little skill, very little talent. Literally pointed the camera, pressed the button, got lucky. If I was doing studio work, I think it would take a tremendous amount of time. And I know some people who do this, professional photographers, and it takes years, maybe decades, to just develop this skill set that it takes to create these stunning images. I know landscape photographers who are incredible in Photoshop and have a lot of skill in the editing process. I know people that do sports photography that don't just take pictures of baseball batters swinging and hitting a baseball. I mean, they take these incredibly creative images. I think a lot of that is innate. I think a lot of that is talent. They just have a very artistic mind and a very artistic eye, and they can create these scenes that are very, very, very powerful. So certainly wildlife photography has some skill and talent, but let me give you this scenario. Dealing with these two forms of wildlife photography, big buckets. I'm going to say one over here will be the portraits, kind of the more artistic and the portrait side. And over here, I'm going to categorize action, documentation and action. I think there's a pretty big distinction between these, by the way, in terms of the skills that are involved. And in some cases, going back to this action category, you could be an incredibly popular photographer taking a lot of action shots. And bear with me when I say this, I'm not trying to single any group of people out, but I think you can do this and not be particularly talented and not have a particularly huge skill set. Give me an example to defend my position. If I took a good tripod and put a $15,000 camera on it and gave somebody a day or two to explain exposure, shutter speed, and we practiced tracking some birds, large birds. Eagles is an easy one, right? So eagles, ospreys, another big one. We could go out locally a couple hours away. There's a place where people photograph short-eared owls. I could set somebody up with me who has had very little experience as a photographer. And in the right setting, if there's action present, we could create, I dare say, award-winning images if the moment was right. It's more about the opportunity than it is about the skill set. It's just getting that perfect moment where the fish is coming out of the water in the spray, or the short-eared owl just banks and turns and it's head on with its wings out. Again, I think I could teach somebody how to do that in just a couple days. It would be much tougher for me to figure out how to teach somebody to do these complicated landscape scenes, maybe to do studio work with lighting and flashes and multiple setups, and then edit it all to make it look great. I think that might require a little bit more skill. Now, again, down in the comments, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I want you to think about that. What is the weight that's placed on things like skill and talent as a photographer doing wildlife? Again, I showed you that other image, that scratchboard image. You know, that is talent. That's incredible skill and talent. And while I think personally, and I'll just talk about myself for a minute, while I think I have some talent and I think I have some skill in what I do, it's not necessarily always on the artistic side. See, as wildlife photographers, it's a lot about our subjects and habitats. So for me, the investment in learning and developing skill is as much in the field as it is with the camera in my hand. It's as much about learning about behavior and animals as it is about holding the camera and pressing the button and editing it. So I think it's just a little bit different for us. I think we have a different skill set. I don't think it always relates to the artistic side. I think a lot of it is the field work. And again, I get back to that action. You know, a lot of it is just the moment. Are we putting ourselves in the moment to be captured? Because that's really powerful and it really resonates with people. I don't always equate popularity with skill. I think everybody kind of knows that. If you don't believe me, by the way, here's a group I saw the other day called the Island Boys. They were a little social media sensation a couple years ago. I have yet to discern any talent in these two individuals, but apparently they were extremely popular for a while. I will spare you the song, but you can Google it on your own and listen to it. It's pretty difficult to listen to. So popularity, certainly popularity, skill, and talent aren't necessarily the same thing. And it's true, you see it in wildlife. We see photographers that, just happen to be able to capture great moments and put together a huge audience. But we may not look at and say they're extremely talented. And I might say that doesn't require a whole lot of skill. We're able to capture these great moments, but does it really require great skill? This last concept before I wrap up. And by the way, again, you don't have to unfollow me because I offended you. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be very logical and just present this argument. Are we talented? And what are our skills? What makes us good? What's the skill set that makes us good? And can you take great wildlife images with very little skill? Think about it. Keep in mind also when you're shooting some of these action shots, I think light at your back, straight front. What is the editing process looks like? While some of those artistic edits can be a little more challenging, some of those action edits can be fairly simple. We've got a camera that's tracking the subject for us. It's shooting at 20 or 30 frames a second. We just have to pick out the sharp frame, crop it the way we want, which doesn't take an incredible amount of talent, maybe make a few adjustments to exposure. And if we did it right and the camera worked as it should, these cameras, I'm sorry, cameras are doing a lot of work for us right now, especially when it comes to action. So this last part of the video is going to deal with something that brings in a couple other characteristics or things that are important in wildlife photography. So we talked about the talent and the skill. Here's two other things that I think are huge factors. One is the gear. I will tell you, gear matters. There's a scale. There's certainly diminishing returns. I'm not saying you have to spend $15,000 or $20,000 on gear, but a $300 camera and lens combined versus a $5,000 camera and lens combination, it's going to make a really big difference in your results, especially around action, because tracking subjects, fast frame rate, all of that makes a big difference. So talent, skill, gear, and this last part is personality. Now, personality, different than talent. So things you're born with, but one is not the talent side. One is actually how you're wired as a human. What I mean by that, and I did a video a while ago about what are the most important personality traits of somebody in wildlife photography. And I came down to this concept of determination and patience and how important those are. Those aren't necessarily talents, but they are sort of the way we're wired. How much of a difference does that make for a wildlife photographer versus the talent that you're born with? Somebody that's more patient and more determined, I think, is more likely to be a good wildlife photographer than somebody who has a God-given gift to track birds or to have incredible hand-eye coordination. Again, there's not a lot of talent in pushing the actual button of a camera. There's just not. So I'm going to give you these four things. I want you to rank them down in the comments, top to bottom. Of these four things, which are the most important to the wildlife photographer and which is the least important? Gear, personality, skill, acquired skill, think editing, think time in the field, and God-given talent. Of those four things, list them in order. I'm going to pause for a minute as you think of this. I'll put the words up here so you can, in your head, gather those, and I'm going to tell you what I think mine are. All right. I think the most important is personality. I think that people who are patient and determined and driven, motivated, who can handle discouragement and who love being outside, because that's another part of the personality, who enjoy the outdoors. That's not a skill. That's not a talent. That's something that's within us, in our personalities. So appreciation for nature. I think that's number one. Number two, it's either gear or skill. If you're a wildlife action photographer, I think it's gear. If you are a portrait photographer or you're doing more artistic work, I think it is more skill. I think more time in the field, more experience in the field, developing an artistic eye, understanding composition theory, all of that, art theory. I think all of that is more important when you're a more artistic photographer and a portrait-oriented photographer. I think when you're an action photographer, I think gear is probably has more of a value. I think it's more important. So I'm gonna list skill, then gear, and the last one is God-given talent. that's honestly for some artists, for some painters, for some musicians, for some athletes, God-given talent may be the most important thing. If you're a professional basketball player, a professional runner, your God-given talent is probably number one on the list. You have to hone it and you have to practice it and you have to develop the skill. But your God-given talent is probably number one on the list. For a wildlife photographer, I'm putting it number 4. I think that talent is the least important thing. And that's my video on wildlife, talent, and skill. Hopefully I pick up a few subscribers here. Hopefully I don't lose any. Down in the bottom, remember we have a deal. If you hit the thumbs down, you got to leave a comment and let me know why. But I hope you like this content. I appreciate you guys tuning in every week and for all of your support on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit the button. There's a little bell down there too. That's notifications. I don't throw a lot of videos out there, so you're not going to get a notification every day. You might get 2 or 3 a month. But that'll let you know when I have a new video out so that you can tune in. Got some product reviews coming up soon. I'll be out in the field as well. I'll try to take you out there with me. As always, thanks for your ongoing support of the channel. And I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.